session today on employer-sponsored visas. We're joined by Mr. Prince Bahal from our Brisbane office today, and he's someone who has extensive amount of knowledge and a depth of expertise when it comes to everything related to employer-sponsored visas, as well as other skill-nominated visas and family visas too. He's been working in the industry for more than 8 years and has successfully assisted thousands of individual clients. Prince's secret weapon is his friendly and warm nature, and he honestly listens to his clients and always delivers outstanding results. No wonder he's one of the most popular and trusted migration agents in Aussies. So, Prince, thank you so much for joining us this evening and for answering everyone's questions about related to employer-sponsored visas. Over to you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Riddhi, and what a wonderful introduction it was. Glad to hear that, for myself. Great. So, guys, myself, Prince, as Riddhi mentioned, from Brisbane office, I'm a registered migration agent and been with Aussies for over 8 years now. We're going to discuss today about employer-sponsored visa. Obviously, that's something that a lot of people get the confusion with, like, whether they would be eligible to apply for employer-sponsored visas or not. What are the requirements for the employer? What are the visa requirements? What is sponsorship? What is nomination? So we're going to cover up pretty much everything that's relate to the employer-sponsored visa. I'll give you an overview of what are we going to discuss today in regards to employer-sponsored visa. We will be covering up a training visa, which is 407 visa, and a temporary skill shortage visa, 482 visa, and employer nomination scheme, which is 186 visa, and skilled employer, regional visa, which is 494 visa. Different visa category have got different visa requirements to apply for. There are a few caveats, but I don't want to go in detail. We'll go step by step so we can avoid the confusion you have in regards to all these different kind of employer-sponsored visas. So let's get started, guys. I'll just wait for a bit more people to join the session. If you're one of those applicants, who really struggle to understand this visa, I'm sure this session would be helpful for you. You can tag your friends, if you think that they may need this information or would be helpful for them. The reason, before I get started, I just want to pinpoint for you, pre-criteria for employer-sponsored visas nowadays. The reason why it's so important to consider this option, because as we all know that, points category for 189, 190, and 491 visa is getting competitive, and it's not easy to get an invitation to apply for a visa in a particular state, especially when we talk about, say, Queensland or Melbourne. Queensland or Victoria. So, as all know, Queensland, they haven't opened the state nomination program till now. So already 3 months been passed for this financial year, and we're still waiting for Queensland state nomination program to open for the financial year. Whereas in Victoria, obviously there are very limited options available for trade occupations, or there are several other occupations like accountant. If you're working in hospitality, like a restaurant manager, or if you're in any category, because as we all know, with Victoria, there are certain occupation, like if you're working in, either of those temps category, you can apply for state sponsorship. But apart from that, you don't have many options available in Victoria. And that's one of the reasons why I believe that a lot of people are moving out from Victoria and choosing another state for state nomination program. But for those of you who have got experience, obviously there are options available to you in that particular state where you are in. So it's not only for Victoria and Queensland, like employer-sponsored visa is pretty much all over Australia. You don't have to have an employer in a particular state. It doesn't rely on the state nomination program. It doesn't rely on the point system. But yes, saying that there are certain requirements that you need to meet to apply for employer-sponsored visa. So depending on your personal circumstances, how many years of experience you have, whether you have an employer to sponsor you for temporary skill shortage visa, training visa, and how these visa leads to permanent residency. As I said, it depends on the visa you apply for. So let's get started. Let me cover up all those main key points that you need to understand and how you would be eligible to apply for these visas. And which visas out of these visa categories from employer-sponsored visa leads to permanent residency. So the first slide, as you can see, guys, I've mentioned 407, 482, 186, 494. These are the common criteria. You have to have an eligible sponsor. So when I say eligible sponsor, it can be a startup business as well. Ideally, the good business would be the business which has been operating for more than 2 years or 3 years. It would be a good business. But saying that if the business hasn't been operating in last, if it's been operating less than 2 years, yes, you can still apply for that. If it's a startup business, you can prepare a business plan for the business, and you can put an application in. So some of the criteria that what department looks at is, the sponsor must have been actively operating the business in Australia, and whatever the obligations are for the sponsorship, obviously if there's any change in the business structure, or if the applicant leaves the employment from the business where they got the sponsorship from, as a sponsor, or as a company, or as a business, department, we need to notify to the Department of Home Affairs that the person who the company sponsored doesn't work with the business anymore, because the applicant has been given visa to work for that business, with that business only. But if the person leaves the employment, obviously the department needs to be notified from the business. While you're holding any of the employer-sponsored visa, most of the employer-sponsored visa requires you to stick with only one employer. So technically, it comes with a condition that you cannot work with any other employer other than the employer who have sponsored you. So that's one of the main thing that you need to keep in mind. You do not want to be in a situation where you kind of get in trouble if department finds that you've been working for any other employer as well other than the employer who sponsored you. So that's very important to understand. And now the last thing is in this visa category, how they all are interrelated. There are mainly 3 applications involved in the entire process for an employer-sponsored visa. The first application is the sponsorship, second one is the nomination, and the third one is a visa application. Now, for sponsorship application and nomination application, these applications are related to the business. So when I say business, obviously we need the documents from the business to lodge these 2 applications, like the business, how the business operates, and what are the financials of the business, where the business operates, and why do they need a person in the business to sponsor. So there are a few documentation that is required under sponsorship and nomination, but that all relates to the business, not to you as a visa applicant. And I assume majority of you who are watching this live session would be the visa applicant interested in this video. And it depends on your business, business profile, and whether, if they meet the requirement or not. Until we look into those criteria, we can't say whether the business can sponsor you or not. One of the main point I would like to mention here is regarding the nomination application, which is the most important application out of these 3 applications, which is sponsorship, nomination, and visa. So the second application, which is the nomination application, is the key application. So I would say 95% of your case is entirely dependent on nomination application. What does it include? Basically, the most important factor that a business or a company or an employer needs to justify to the Department of Home Affairs is that whether this position is genuine in the business or not. So in order to prove that, they have to show that how the business will grow in the near future if they sponsor this person. At the same time, what are the benefits for the business if they sponsor if they sponsor the applicant, and was it an existing position in the business, or it's a new position that a business is creating in the business to sponsor you. For example, to give you an example, if I had a production company, I'll take an example of an accountant, because that's pretty common nowadays. A lot of accountants obviously are struggling to secure a state nominated visa, or basically general skill migration pathway for the permanent residency. This is where it's getting very popular for accountant to go for employer sponsored visa, because if those are the applicants who have got experience, they can apply for this visa. And just for your knowledge, or the information for accountants who are watching this video, in the last financial year, I think the most, I would say, popular occupation for the applicants who applied for this employer-sponsored visa were accountants. So accountants was top on the list. Most of the majority of the occupations were in hospitality And as I said, trade people are struggling as well. So, but accountant was one of the main ones. So if you're a chef, cook, carpenter, painter, or a restaurant manager, or if you're working in marketing industry, like as a marketing specialist, or if you're working in any other area, like different visa category got different requirements. So getting back to the nomination point, nomination is the key. One of the other major criteria to apply for nomination application is that business needs to advertise the position. So in order for the reason for the advertisement is to prove it to the Department of Home Affairs that business had the genuine intention to hire an Australian citizen or permanent resident. Basically, department wants to see has the business or Australian business has made a genuine effort to find a local person first, rather than going and reaching out to someone for the sponsorship. So an advertisement needs to be placed, and we need to prove it to the department that we couldn't find any local person to fit this position. We couldn't find the skills to fit the position in our business. And that is the reason why we are extending our sponsorship to an overseas applicant. So that all comes in the nomination application. And the last part is the visa application, where you have to prove that, whether you got the right skills set to apply for this nominated occupation, and you got the right qualification as well to fit into that position. So depending which occupation you apply, obviously different level of qualification leads to a different occupation. For example, if you got diploma of hospitality management, obviously, and if you want to apply for a restaurant manager, you can apply for it. But at the same time, if you got diploma of hospitality management and you want to apply for accountant position, it's not going to happen, because your study needs to be relevant with your experience as well, and your nominated occupation as well. So for accountant, it's a skill level 1 occupation. The applicant needs to have minimum bachelor or bachelor level qualification. And I'll talk further when we go to the next slides. So yeah, I hope I've discussed the common criteria. If you have any questions, guys, feel free to pop them in. I'll be taking questions while we go through the slides, while we go through the entire live session. I'll be taking a few questions during the process. And at the same time, with the time constraints, see how we go. If we have more questions, we will revert back to those questions as soon as possible. Now, the first part is the training visa. Now, with the training visa, as I mentioned, sponsorship, nomination, and visa application are there. Basically, in the 407 training visa, sponsorship part remains the same. We need the financials of the business to prove it to the department that business is financially capable to sponsor a person. Nomination is something that doesn't require and a job advertisement to be placed, or a labor market testing is not required in this process, because labor market testing is basically required for 482 visa, 186 visa, and 494 visa. But for training visa, labor market testing or job advertisement is not required for nomination application. And this process, we need to prepare a training plan, or a business needs to prepare a training plan and submit to the department that how the business is going to deliver a training to the nominee or the visa applicant. Now, visa applicant like yourself, if you apply for this visa, you can be granted a visa from 12 months up to 24 months. So obviously you get full-time work rights, and you have to work only with the same employer. So if you're running out of your time, or if you're, for example, if your 485 visa is about to expire, rather than applying for a COVID visa, or if you want to apply for a student visa, if you feel that this is something you can look into, and if your employer is willing to sponsor you, you can look into training visa. Now, what are the requirements in terms of visa applicant? So as you can see on the screen, you must have completed your study in last 1 year. Oh, sorry, my bad. You must have completed your study in last 2 years, or you must have minimum 1 year of full-time work experience in the last 2 years. So either one of them. So if you have 1 year of work experience, again, getting back to the accountant, Bachelor of Accounting or Masters of Accounting, if you're done, you are on your temporary graduate visa. In the first year of temporary graduate visa, you do not have any experience, but you recently completed your master's qualification. If you have an employer to sponsor you, on the basis of your recently completed qualification, you can apply for, training visa under the category of completing the study in the last 24 months. But if you have 1 year of experience in the last 2 years, that's another way to apply for temporary, another way to apply for training visa. Now, the benefit of this visa, it allows you to work full-time, again, with the same employer only. You can't work anywhere else. You have to work with the same employer. And one of the major criteria that you need to meet is GTE criteria, which is genuine temporary entrant criteria. It's pretty much similar to student visa GTE, that you have to prove that you do not have genuine intention to live permanently in Australia, and you have got intentions to temporarily stay in Australia. And you have to have functional English, which is 5 overall with 4.5 minimum. So the requirements are not that high. It's beneficial for those applicants, who are struggling to, gain some work experience, and they can reach out to their employers for training visa on the basis of their study. But for those of you who have got experience, obviously there are other visas you can apply for, which also leads to permanent residency. One thing before I move on to the next slide, that the experience you have, the experience you gain on 407 visa can be utilized to apply for 482 visa eventually, which leads to permanent residency as well. So, just keep that in mind. A lot of people may not know this. So say if you apply for a 407 visa, if you don't have any experience, you have applied for a training visa on the basis of your qualification, you gain 2 years of experience, you can apply for 482 visa after that, which further leads to permanent residency, which again depends on the occupation as well. So there are a lot of factors that we need to look into. It's not just one straight answer, because it's pretty much quite different from general skilled migration or point-based visa or permanent visas. This is a completely different category. So there are a lot of factors that we need to look into. Which, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot us a message and we can look into it. And I'll be taking a few questions shortly. Then the next one is a 482 visa, which is commonly known as temporary skill shortage visa. The sponsorship and nomination is pretty much same what I mentioned in the first slide when we started the live session. Now for visa applicant, the visa applicant must have minimum 2 years of full-time work experience. In the last 5 years, that's ideally expected. But if you have 2 years of experience, say 6 years ago, that can still be looked into it. It doesn't mean that you do not meet the requirement, but it is generally expected that you have 2 years of work experience in the last 5 years and full-time work experience in the last 5 years. Now, skill assessment is not required for this, like in this process to apply for a visa. It's, as I mentioned before, that general skilled migration, to apply for a visa, you need a skills assessment as well, mandatory. To apply for employer-sponsored visa under 482 category, you do not have to have a skills assessment. As long as you got 2 years of work experience, you can apply for 482 visa. Now, depending on the occupation, which occupation you're applying for, whether it falls under the long-term list or a short-term list, that's how you decide whether it leads to permanent residency or not. Usually, if your occupation falls on the long-term list, you can apply for permanent residency after 3 years. So if once a 482 visa is granted, it will be granted for 4 years for occupations on the long-term list, and 2 years if your occupation falls on the short-term list. So for 4 years, again, I'll give you an example so you guys understand better. So for 4 years, for example, accountant, you applied as an accountant, 4-year visa, you got it. After 3 years working with the same employer, you can apply for 186 visa, which is like, permanent residency visa under a transition stream. Now, if you applied, for example, as a cook, that falls in the short-term category. You get the visa only for 2 years, but it doesn't lead to permanent residency. However, you can reapply again for another 2 years as well. So it's kind of a 2+2 combination rather than 4 years straight away. So you get first granted for 2 years plus 2 years again. You got 4, you can extend it up to 4 years, but if you were to extend again, obviously, there are limited options. But if you get to that point where you have to re-extend it again for next time, which is another 2 years after 2 years, I would probably say to look into the state nomination criterias, or find another state where you can move into and you can meet the eligibility criteria for state nomination, either 190 or 491. Now, there are some occupation which falls under role list, which is a regional occupation list. For that, your employer must be based in the regional area. Benefit for some of the benefits are, if even if your occupation is on the short-term list, you may be able to apply for, permanent residency. But it does lead, I mean, let me give you the example for, if your occupation falls on the short-term list, but your employer is based in a regional area, you can apply for a temporary skill shortage visa that may lead to permanent residency as well, even if it's in short term, because your employer is based in regional, you get this extra benefit. So if your occupation is in short term, try to find an employer in a regional area, because that may lead to permanent residency pathway. But again, different occupation, every occupation we have to look into it, whether it leads to the permanent residency pathway or not. I hope that's pretty clear for 482 visa. Moving on further, the next category would be 186 visa, which is which is something getting very popular for those experienced applicants who have got more than 3 years of work experience. They are pretty much considering direct entry stream under 186 because it's a visa that you can apply with the employer, and it's a direct PR pathway. So direct entry is for those applicants who got minimum 3 years of work experience plus a skills assessment in their nominated occupation. So if you meet these two criteria, skills assessment plus 3 years of experience, plus relevant qualification, plus you got minimum 6 bands in each module of ALS, and you have an employer to sponsor you, doesn't matter if it's in regional or in metropolitan city, you can apply for a direct entry stream, but it only applies to the occupation falling under long-term stream. So if you have this in your mind that, okay, well, I'm a cook, I've got about 4 years of experience, I've got a skills assessment, I've got an employer to sponsor me, can I apply for direct entry? Unfortunately not, because cook falls in the short-term list, and it only applies to long-term occupation like chef. So if the similar scenario I take it for chef, yes, they can apply for direct entry and they can get a permanent residency directly. Quickest and shortest pathway to achieve permanent residency in the present world for those applicants who have got experience. Now, for those of you who were on if you are going to apply for 482 visa, once you work with the employer for 3 years, the visa you apply for 186 visa is under transition stream. So working with the employer for 3 years, you apply for permanent residency under transition stream. That's the pathway for 186 visa for the permanent residency for those applicants. And that again, applies to those applicants who have applied under long-term list, nominated the occupation in the long term rather than the short term, because with long term, you had a visa for 4 years, and after 3 years, you get eligible to apply for permanent residency pathway under 186 visa. All right. So the benefit of this 186 visa, as I mentioned before, the employer can be anywhere. It doesn't matter if it's in regional or metropolitan area. You can apply for 186 visa. And when I say 186 visa, it's a direct permanent residency visa. Doesn't matter you apply under direct entry or transition stream, both are permanent residency visas. Yep, that's a kind of a screenshot or kind of an overview of the difference between these two visa categories. A direct entry stream, as I mentioned, must have an occupation on eligible occupation list. What I'm trying to say here is the long-term list. You must have minimum 3 years of full-time work experience, as I mentioned before, plus a mandatory skills assessment. So skill assessment is must. With transition stream, it's a little bit different. You must have held a visa for a 2 visa for minimum written 457, but obviously we are getting to the transition phase where by March next year, 457 visa transition wouldn't be there anymore after that. So yeah, if you held a visa for about 3 years on for a 2 week, if you had the experience or a healthy visa for 3 years on 482 visa, you can apply for transition visa. And you must have worked with the same employer for 3 years to apply for 186 visa. The benefit of this is, skill assessment is not mandatory. I'll share this experience with you. Who are the people who can get benefit of transition stream? We had a couple of therapists in the past who we have processed when I say therapist, physiotherapists, couple of physiotherapists in the past who had a limited registration. Now, with the limited registration, obviously, you cannot apply for a direct entry pathway, or you cannot apply under general skill migration as well. Now, one of the way for them to kind of reach to the permanent residency was through employer-sponsored visa. So with the limited registration, you can apply for a 482 visa. And once you secure the visa for 4 years, after 3 years, you can still apply for a permanent residency under transition pathway. Because with employer sponsored visa, there is a bit of flexibility that you're being sponsored by an employer, but you will be working under a supervision, of your superior or your senior, and they kind of allow that you to apply. Like, you don't have to have a nil registration. You can apply with limited registration as well for the transition stream 186 visa, which is a permanent residency visa. So I hope that makes sense to you. The last one is 494 visa. This is mainly skilled employer sponsored regional visa. Back in the days, we used to call RSMS, which was 187 visa. It's not there anymore, but it has been replaced by 494 visa with a lot of new requirements. So with this visa, you have to meet pretty much the similar requirement, which is an under 186 direct entry, 3 years of full-time work experience plus skills assessment plus 6 each. But your employer must be based in regional area. So you must be thinking, well, what's the difference between 494 visa and 186 visa? Now, the benefit of 494 visa is that it gives you a broad range of occupation list. Like, you will see a lot of occupations which are not available under long-term list. You will find those occupations under 494 visa category list. And it's basically those regional occupation list, the occupation and the regional occupation list. If you see your occupation there, you can apply for 494 visa under that category. Once 494 is pretty much like 491 visa, if you work with 491 visa, I'm sure you would all know this thing that with 491 visa and 494 visa, it's pretty much similar in a way that the both applicant get a visa granted for 5 years. And after working in the regional area for 3 years and 494 visa, you can apply for 191 visa as well. Now, recently we had a clarification from the department that if you get a sponsorship from an employer in regional area for 494 visa, to apply for 191 visa, do you have to be working with the same employer only for 3 years or not? The good news is that you can change your employer as well, but you need to notify the department and redo the nomination application, because you already been granted a visa from the department, but you need to redo the nomination. But you can combine the work experience from one employer and second employer and make it accumulative for 3 years, and you can apply for 191 visa after 3 years, which is a permanent residency visa. Similar to 491 visa, and during the duration of your entire 3 years, when you get eligible for 191, you got to show that you've been earning 53,900, which is the minimum TISMIT rate, which is minimum salary package that an employer must offer you to apply for 494, 482 or 186 visa. For training visa, there is no as such requirement. Obviously, a trainee payroll, a trainee rate can be applicable to the trainee visa, but for the other visa categories, you need to get a minimum salary of 53,900 plus superannuation. Last thing, an overview of all 3 visa categories other than training visa. As you can see on screen, 482, 2 years of work experience, 186, 3 years, and 494, 3 years as well. 482, you don't need a skill assessment. 186, it's mandatory, and 494, it's mandatory as well. 482, if your occupation is under long term, 3 years of work experience is required to apply for permanent residency. If it's on the short term, you may have to look for a general skill migration pathway or try to find an employer in a regional area. With 186, direct PR, and 494, obviously you have to work with the regional employer for minimum 3 years to apply for 191 visa, which is a permanent residency visa yet to be introduced by next year, November 2022. They haven't started this thing yet. Obviously, this is something that which department has planned to introduce by pretty much end of next year. So we will see applicants coming in to apply for 191 visa after being granted 491 visa. So yes, guys, that's what I wanted to cover, and I'm sure I can see a few questions on the screen. I wanted to answer. More than happy to take a few questions, but as I said, due to the time constraints, I wouldn't be able to take all the questions, and can answer a few questions, but rest assured that we will revert back to all of your questions very soon. So I've got this question on my screen. I've got it from Musa Habib Kishan. What are the costs for employer and labor market test is compulsory for 186 direct entry? Okay, that's a good question, Musa. Labor market testing is not mandatory for 186 direct entry. Now, in terms of cost, obviously it varies. So, for direct, I assume you're asking only for direct entry. So in terms of direct entry for 186, there are two applications involved, just the nomination and visa application. For nomination, it's 540 plus depending on the turnover of the business. So there is a thing called SAF, which is Skilling Australia Fund. So if the business turnover is over $10 million, it would be $5,000 once-off cost. And if it's less than $10 million, it's $3,000 once-off cost. So assuming it's less than $10 million, it would be $540 plus $3,000. Now for the visa applicant, it's pretty much like GSM, similar to what you apply for 190, 491, or 189. Yeah, I think it's about 4,100 something. So that's the cost involved in the entire process. And labor market testing is not mandatory. I hope that helps. So I'll take the next question. It's from Mahabub Manan Shoaib. Which visa I can apply from here and which sorry, I missed the first part. It's Mahabub. I have been working at a fuel station since February till now. It's regional under Central West RDA. I want to do the skill assessment from this company. Which visa I can apply from here and which occupation I can do the skill assessment. From my question is from fuel station, can I do skill assessment as a contract administrator or which okay. Now, Mahbub, at a fuel station, I don't know whether you read the duties and responsibilities for a contract administrator. So my recommendation to you is to look at the duties and responsibilities of a contract administrator first. And I'm quite confident if you mentioned that you're working at a fuel station, you may not meet the requirement what department is looking for. For you, it may be a different definition for contract administrator, but you got to look from department point of view what they mean to say when it's required when you apply as a contract administrator. So it's quite hard to get a contract administrator approved from a fuel station. In terms of occupation, there are certain occupations you can apply for, but one of the most popular occupation which I can share with you and may be helpful for a lot of other applicants as well who are working at a fuel station or a business in a regional area in Australia, like, if you're working at an IGA fuel station or tobacconist or, any other kind of business where, you can apply for a retail manager. There's an occupation called retail manager. That is something you can apply for. We have had several successful cases, probably in last year and a half, where we got these visa approved as a retail manager from the businesses in regional area. But the challenge there is that you need to have minimum 3 years of full-time work experience plus a valid skills assessment as well. So you mentioned you've been working there since February, but you haven't mentioned February this year or February, which February, which year February you're talking about. But if you started in say 2017 or 2018, by this time I assume you would have have 3 years of experience. Go for retail manager occupation, and if the business turnover is good, there is a very good chance you will get the 494 visa approved. So talking about 494, I would like to mention to all those applicants who have had a refusal as a retail manager in the past, back in 2018, we had hundreds of application refused from Department of Home Affairs for retail managers because there was an era when department wasn't accepting any application for retail managers. Now, if you're one of those applicants or if you know anybody who is in the similar situation or they have applied for AAT for a review and they're still continuously working for the same employer for last 2 or 3 years, they are still eligible to apply for 494 visa. Do not rely 100% on your RSMS or if you're waiting on federal or AAT for your RSMS application. This is something you should consider. Reapply again from the business for 494 visa, get your skills assessment done as a retail manager. We have done a lot of cases. If you're one of those applicants, get in touch with your nearest Aussie's office, and I'm sure one of our migration agent would be able to assist you specifically if you are in this similar scenario. So let's move on to the next question, guys. I've got what's the financial minimum requirement for business? This is from Pratish, Rachel. Pratisha didn't get it, like financial minimum requirement for business. Look, I I assume that you're trying to ask, is there any particular figure from the department that what sort of turnover the business should have? To be honest, like there's no as such figures that has been declared or been given from the department that if a business turnover is over this amount, then they can sponsor. What department wants to see that has the business making enough revenue and they can afford the person to employ and can pay the salary after all the expenses, whether the business is making profit or not. This is how the department assesses the application. Let me give you a quick example. Like say, I've got a business, my business is making $500,000, like $500,000, but I have been getting loss in my business for the last 2 years for say $50,000 and $100,000 in last 2 financial year. Now, on top of that, I go to the department and say, okay, I want to sponsor this person who I'll be paying as a business owner, I'll be paying $54,000 or $53,900 plus super. The biggest question that comes to a case officer's mind is like how the business is going to afford this person. Businesses has been in loss for the last 2 years. On top of that, they want to sponsor this person, which is an add-on cost to the business. How are they going to sponsor this person? How are they going to afford this person? It creates a question mark, or it creates a concern for the case officer to look into the thing which I mentioned before is genuine position. Because if it is a genuine position, obviously, a business owner will do something to make the business profitable before reaching out to someone to sponsor him or her. So this is how the department assesses the application. So I hope you understood what the point I'm trying to make here. But as I said, with employer-sponsored visa questions, you may think that it's just a straightforward question. When we have to answer those questions, we have to look at a lot of other factors. Like in case if somebody nomination has been refused, I can't tell you until I see the nomination refusal, until I understand the business, until I know the revenue of the business, until I know what sort of operation they do, what nomination occupation you have applied for. There are a lot of factors we have to look into when we look into anything like that. But yes, the whole idea of doing these sort of live sessions is to go give you an overview picture of how employer-sponsored visa works. So let's move on further, guys. The next question I've got on my screen is Heshan De Silva. Is it possible to do offshore applicants to apply for subclass 482 visa, job category accountant, bachelor, CPA, UK with 13 years of experience with 65 plus NPT? Yes, certainly, Heshan. You've asked like a tricky question because I've been asked this question a few times from other applicants as well. That I'm an accountant, I've got good numbers of years, like good years of experience overseas, and I want to apply for an accountant position for a firm who wants to sponsor me, as an accountant. If you are overseas, yes, it is possible, but keep in mind, considering there are a lot of accountants out there who are struggling to secure their permanent residency through general skill migration, and there are a lot of accountants out there looking or seeking job opportunities as well. Not the international, not only the visa holders, even if you are a permanent resident citizens, there are a lot of, shortage, job opportunities. People are looking for a position of accountant. Now, you being an overseas applicant or overseas accountant, your company who wants to sponsor you need to justify that why do they think that you have got all those extraordinary skills and why they couldn't find anybody from onshore and they want to bring you over from overseas and they want to sponsor you as an accountant. So realistically speaking, I have done quite a few cases for overseas, offshore accountants, but the way you need to relate the case is that you as an overseas accountant has got the knowledge of Australian taxation process. That's something, a key that you need to relate with your experience. Like with UK, I don't know, I'm not personally familiar with the UK taxation process, but if it's something similar to Australian taxation process, obviously you can relate that the taxation process or the taxation terms and condition or the procedure in UK and Australia are pretty much similar. I have got exposures to work with the firms in Australia, and I've worked on different platforms or different companies in Australia, and you were outsourced as an accountant. And that is the reason, considering all the exposure you have for last 10 or 12 years, that is the reason why company feels that you are the right applicant for this position and you can apply for accountant from overseas. And yes, with your years of experience, your qualification, and your PTE score, it's all good. Now, I assume you're talking about 482. If you have 13 years of experience and if you've got a company to sponsor you, you can also apply for direct entry instead of 482. That's a direct PR pathway, like you can apply under 186 direct entry. But keep in mind the the revenue of the company who's going to sponsor you must be over $1 million, and they must have minimum 5 employees, because this is the caveat that has been implemented on accountant position from the Department of Home Affairs. There are certain occupation which has got caveats. If your occupation is one of those occupation where you have caveats, like you need to make sure that you do meet the requirement. So with the accountant, it's over, the business turnover must be $1 million, and you must have minimum 5 employees in the business before the company reach out to the department that they want to put a nomination application to sponsor you. I hope that helps, Hishan. So guys, moving on to the next one. Excuse me. I've got this question from Noman Khan. Can we work somewhere else along with the main sponsor, like part-time? Noman, I wish I could say yes to this, but saying that, depending which visa category we are talking about. If it's 482 and 494, yes, sorry, if it's with 482, no, it's not possible. 407 and 482, it's not possible. But with 186, both categories, as long as you're meeting your employment contract requirements, which is minimum 38 hours a week with the sponsored employer, it's all good for 186. And same goes with 494 as well. As long as you're working with the employer, you've been working with the employer for minimum 38 hours, it should be okay to go ahead and work for the other employer. Hope that helps, Noman. The next one I've got is from Luda. I've got from Luda Ruby. Does the 3 years have to be full-time? Yes, Luda, depending if you're talking about 186 direct entry, yes, it has to be full-time. And now if you're talking about 482, I mean, when I say 3 years full-time, if you got 6-year part-time, that will be considered as a 3-year full-time as well. So it doesn't have to be consecutive 3 years full-time. As I mentioned, 6 years part-time would be considered 3-year full-time as well. Now, 482, whichever visa we apply for, we are talking about full-time employment only. No, part-time experience can be used towards full-time, but it's not considered for the visa purpose. For example, if you got 2 years of part-time experience, that will be considered 1 year full-time work experience, similar to 6-year part-time and 3 years full-time. Hope that helps, Luda. Moving on to the next one is from Akshay Joshi. He says that with 3 years of requirement for direct entry, is the 3-year requirement at the time of application or time of decision? My visa will be running out and I'll be just few weeks short to complete 3 years. If I apply for visa and be on a bridging visa, then in 3 to 4 weeks after that, I'll complete 3 years. But if 3 years requirement is at the time of application, then probably 186 won't be an option. So yeah, Akshay, I understand your question. So basically you're trying, like, just to elaborate for all of you who are watching this live session to make you understand how this works. For 186 at the time, it's the criteria which you need to meet at the time of application. But with 482, it's the criteria that you need to meet at the time of decision. So if you are going to apply for 482 visa, obviously you do meet the requirement of 2 years, but it would have been different. For example, if you were short of 3 months for 2 years of experience, yes, you can go for 482 visa because it's at the time of decision criteria. But for 186 is the time of application criteria, which means that if you lodge your visa application, with less short of 3 months and 3 years, it will be refused. I would suggest in a situation like this, where your visa is running out, apply for nomination and then apply for a COVID visa, 408 visa. Most likely you will buy some time and you can complete your work experience for next 3 to 6 months of time. And the moment you cover up your remaining months, the moment you claim that 3 years of work experience, you can lodge a visa application. That would be an ideal approach to apply for the visa under direct entry. But yeah, just make sure you do not apply if you're short of 3 years. So moving on to the next one, guys, let me have a look. It's from Hemant Mahato. Is Baker needs skills assessment for 482 visa? I need to have a look, but I'm quite confident. Depending on the country you're from as well, it depends on that as well, and whether you got a qualification or how many years of work experience you have got. Baker, yes, if you do not have a qualification from Australia, If you got an RPL qualification and if you got experience from from Australia or overseas, you fall into the category of mandatory skills assessment, which I believe that you need a skill assessment as a baker. Now the next one is from Roshan Shalenka. I'm hoping to do a master's of accounting. What are chances of getting PR through accounting and below qualification? Bachelor of Commerce in Accounting and Finance, Master's in Accounting, Associate Master member of this, certified CPA, four-year experience in KPMG. Okay. Right. So, look, honestly speaking, Roshan, you can pretty much pick any of the qualification as long as all those qualification. After completing that qualification, you can get a skills assessment from CPA, assuming that you've got about 4 years of work experience. If you had the relevant qualification prior to that work experience, you can use that experience to apply for 186 visa or 482 visa. But Masters of Accounting, obviously, with accounting, the PR options are very limited. And the best way, as I mentioned in the beginning of this live session, would be to go for employer-sponsored visa. And an applicant like yourself who's got more than 3 years of experience, the best way is to go with a 186 direct entry if you have an employer to sponsor you. In your case, I would like to mention one thing is if you have an overseas qualification and the experience you have is if after the qualification, you should look into getting your skills assessment done from CPA or the other assessment body as well. If they consider all of your, get your employment assessed as well, if they consider all the qualification equivalent to Australian qualification, if they consider your overseas qualification equivalent to Australian qualification, and they give you the skill assessment they give you the skill assessment including your employment as well, you don't have to continue your studies as well. You can straight away apply for employer-sponsored visa, which will, kind of save you a lot of time, effort, and obviously financially it would be beneficial for you as well. So I hope that helps. But if your qualification is not highly relevant, then you may have to choose a pathway to study and go through that pathway. But again, we have to look into all these in detail. I'm here to give you an overview that how it can lead to permanent residency. So as I mentioned before, if you have any questions, I'm based in Brisbane, but if you're based in Victoria or any other state, you can get in touch with our closest Aussies Group office. And all of our migration agents are well trained and expertise in this area, so I'm pretty much sure they should be able to assist you and and can go through the process. We have had a good history to get a lot of successful outcome for employer-sponsored visa with the big firms we have worked with, and we are still continuing to work in this area. And you can trust us on this process, and you will get genuine advice what are the chances to get your visa approved or not. Because I've come across a lot of applicants in the past coming to me from different migration agents that, this is the company who wants to sponsor me, this is what I do, and whether it can be done or not. So as I mentioned, 3 factors what we need to look into. What does the company do? Like basically their operations, what do they do exactly? How your nominated occupation fits into that business, and whether it is a genuine position or not. These are the key factors that we need to look into before we decide whether it is possible or not. So again, if you have a scenario like this where you have an employer, who wants to sponsor you, get in touch with us, get it assessed. It's an expensive process, expensive exercise. You do not want to be in a situation where you spend good amount of money, or your employer has spent good amount of money, and getting a refusal from the department can be stressing as well, most of the time. So I hope you guys had a good information session with myself, and thank you so much for joining me on this live session. I hope to see you guys soon. And for those of you who we haven't answered the questions yet due to the time limits, I have to go ahead with turning off the session, but we will reply back to all of your questions very soon. So thank you once again, guys, for watching this live session. And, if you feel that some of your friends were not able to join the session, please share it with them. Let them know that, the information what we have discussed, it would be definitely helpful for them. So goodbye for now, guys. Thank you so much once again. Thanks very much.